Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Industry 4 in Action webinar, which is part of the Callaghan Innovation Industry 4 Demonstration Network program. I'm Catherine Lai, Head of Advanced Manufacturing at the EMA, that's the Employers and Manufacturers Association, and I'm delighted to have Chris Molinar, Managing Director, Petone Engineering, join us on today's webinar, which will be emceed by our delivery partner, Frank Phillips, who's the Advanced Manufacturing Manager at LMAG. Before I invite Chris to share his insights and learnings with you all, I'd like to spend just a few minutes providing a high-level overview of the Industry 4 Demonstration Network program. So this is a government initiative to help New Zealand manufacturers realise the benefits of a range of Industry 4 technologies, all designed to enhance manufacturing performance, monitoring, output and control. So Industry 4 is the convergence of a range of technologies, AR, VR, AI, 3D printing, IoT, robotics, automation, digital twins. And combined, these represent a significant opportunity to improve operational efficiency, quality, and business intelligence. So data-driven decision-making in real time. Knowing when and how to incorporate these technologies into your business model isn't easy, and the Industry 4 Demonstration Network is here to help you adapt. So Callaghan Innovation has teamed up with official partners Becca and the Employers and Manufacturers Association to deliver this Industry 4 Demonstration Network, which consists of 3 activities. The first is a virtual smart factory tour to see what a high level of Industry 4 integration looks like across a highly advanced factory here in New Zealand, and that is Nortec Electronics. So Nortec Electronics were taken through the SIRI assessment and ranked best in class, the top 10% of manufacturers globally who had been through the SIRI assessment. So the internationally recognised SIRI assessment was developed in Singapore and adopted by the World Economic Forum. And the process assesses your business for Industry 4 maturity across 16 dimensions that fall broadly into 3 categories: people, technology, and processes, and prioritises the key dimensions that will deliver the best returns growth for your business. The outcome is a benchmarking against your peers globally and within New Zealand, and a high-level prioritisation roadmap to accelerate your development in the adoption of Industry 4 technologies. Now, there's a lot that you could do, but what should you do? So this assessment will support manufacturers in their Industry 4 investment decision-making to promote a successful early adoption. So Callaghan is providing fully funded opportunities to assess your facility through this process, and that links into the network of the second activity, which is a network of site visits, which is designed to encourage the sharing of Industry 4 knowledge across the sector. So whether you're well into your Industry 4 journey or just starting out, the program provides a range of opportunities, case studies, webinars, and factory visits to expand your understanding of Industry 4 technologies and learn from others who have already embarked on their Industry 4 journey. Petone Engineering applied for a fully funded SIRI assessment in year 3 of the Industry 4 Demonstration Network program and were successful. As part of the program, they have opened their doors to manufacturers to share their knowledge and learnings. And this webinar series is another channel and opportunity for Chris to share progress and updates with a much wider audience. So we're excited to hear their learnings and quick wins over the last 4 months since completing the SIRI assessment. The third activity is the mobile showcase, which is led by Becca, which takes the form of a chocolate sorting mini production line equipped with several advanced Industry 4 technologies. So Becca will have a conversation with your teams about the applications of these technologies, share some successful implementation stories, give you hands-on time with the gear, and outline what support is available to help you apply the technology in your business. So please refer to the industry4.govt.nz website to access all the case studies, webinar recordings, and upcoming events for the final year of the Industry 4 program. I'm delighted now to invite Frank Phillips to talk through the format of today's webinar. So thanks, Frank. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Wonderful introduction and give us a great overview of the Industry 4 demonstration network. Kia ora koutou, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's going to be a great webinar. We've got some really good content to cover. We're going to be going through briefly a little bit about Petone engineering and what they do in the industry. We're going to be talking a little bit about traceability, how they get information of the thousands of components and parts that they're dealing with real time into their system. We're going to be talking about integrated product lifecycle, how they transition from a digital model of a building through to automation on the shop floor of the fabrication of those products. So there's some really interesting technologies that we're going to touch on. What I would like to invite everybody to do is use the Q&A function on Zoom today. So if you've got any questions at any point through the webinar, it'd be great to hear from you. So down at the bottom of your screen, you should have a little Q&A functionality. If you click on that and type in your question, it'll pop up in front of me here and I can pose those questions throughout the webinar at the right time to Chris. We'll also have some time at the end for a general Q&A as well about any of the topics we've covered, anything in the Industry 4 demonstration network that Catherine's just mentioned. So please do use that, make it as interactive as possible. But without further ado, I'll bring Chris into the conversation. So Chris is the Managing Director at Petone Engineering. Chris, we'll bring up some slides and let you just kick off with a bit about who Petone are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Frank and Catherine. Hopefully we can add some value to those that are listening. Petone Engineering has been around for since 2004. So it started off as a two-man operation doing general engineering, which is quite common for engineering shops. That's how we start off. And we built up to a team of about 10 and then realised that we didn't have much work ahead of us. So we decided to specialise in structural steel, where you could have 6 months work ahead, and it was much better for planning and a bit less stress on the owners. So now we are fully into structural steel, and we have a team of about between 50 to 60, depending on how many sub-trades we've got working for us. Our process is quite simple. Each part of it's quite, they're quite challenging, the individual parts, but the basic process all begins with a model, which we've got on the slide there. The detailers will take the engineer's drawings and the architect's drawings. They'll produce that model and try and find any clashes, anything that doesn't work. It's quite critical that this model is done well, because everything from the rest of our process comes from that model. So once we've been given the job, it's accepted, and the model's been produced, and the engineers have all checked it, they're happy with it. We use the model that gets pulled into our software, which is Strumus, and from there we can generate a bill of materials which go out to suppliers. It does all the nesting of those materials for plate and for the shafts, which are the steel parts, even down to the bolts. And when those prices come back, once we've accepted them, Strumus then nests it and produces cutting lists for our team, and including fabrication drawings. So from those drawings, we do the cutting, we cut the plate, it goes to the shop where it's fabricated. The steel's cut on the saw or drilled on the beam line. Once the guys have put it together, we send it to paint, and from paint it goes to site and it's installed. All along the way, there's a whole lot of QA that has to happen at each step, and that's something we're about to discuss next.
Absolutely. So Thanks very much, Chris, for talking us through the process. I was just going to touch really quickly on the SIRI assessment that Catherine mentioned in terms of some of the material and some of the reasons we're talking about the various technologies today. So on the screen, I've just done an overview of Petone's kind of scores across that SIRI assessment. And the areas in green there are the kind of technologies we're going to talk about today. They're the areas where Petone are already very mature. They've spent some time and effort as a team progressing in those areas. And then the ones in orange I've just left on there, they're the areas that Petone are potentially going to be focusing on over the next couple of years after their SIRI assessment. And this is where we found the major opportunities, if you like, for further investment and time from the team to make progress. So those key topics, we're going to be talking about vertical integration, which I mentioned at the start, getting information up and down through the business. So from where the value add is happening, either on site in terms of erecting the steel or in the fabrication shop itself, into Strumis that's managing a lot of that process, or even information about who's on site and where, into clocking in, clocking out software and payroll and so on. So that flow of information up and down is really important. That integrated product lifecycle, Chris just touched on very briefly there around that movement from the model into the shop floor process. We're going to be talking about how that happens and how we keep the traceability there, which is really important in this industry. And we'll be finishing up with talking a little bit around enterprise connectivity, bringing some of the information from around the business together, and last but not least, talking about some of the strategy and where Petone are looking to go next. So that's the main topics and why we've done that. In terms of the logic behind picking out those, you can just see here some of the scores against the benchmark for Petone. So in those process areas right at the top there, I won't go into all the definitions in detail, but you can see Petone being the blue bars on that graph are well above average, well above the middle 80% there on all those process areas, and the same in some of those three organizational areas at the bottom. So that's why we're focusing on those couple of technologies, because they've made some real progress. So without further ado, I'll pass back to Chris. Maybe, Chris, you'd want to start by talking us through a little bit about the traceability and part marking process.
Yes, yeah, we'll do. So this is our QA process. As you can see, there's quite a bit in it. We went through there's just some bit of background. There's still, in New Zealand, there's a thing called SFC, Steel Fabricator Certification, which is effectively, it's like ISO 9001, but it's specific to structural steel and structural steel in New Zealand. And it's a full quality management system, meaning if I put a piece of steel in a building, I need to be able to show at the end what mill certificate went with that, which is like the mill certificate and the heat number. The heat number corresponds to the mill certificate, and that shows you the chemical makeup, basically the ingredients of that steel and the grade of that steel. And as it flows through the whole workshop process to get into site, we need to trace that heat number to those individual assemblies. So that's one of the big parts of the traceability. Right through, we need to be able to trace the welders, the fabricators, all the paint QA, right through the whole process. And at the end, present a nice package to the engineer, the council, and the client with all of that traceability. So can be quite an onerous task if it's not done well. And I would say when we first did it, it probably wasn't done that well. So it was very manual. I'll give you a brief overview. So what we used to do, we had a cutting list, and we would write the heat numbers on each assembly. Very manual, quite laborious for the guy on the saw. Then we would scan those and save them in the folder. Didn't look very pretty when the client got it either. Then on the drawings, we would have a series of boxes. And all the way through the process, somebody would put their name in the box to say they fabricated the beam, and then the QA man would check it, and he would put his name in the box, and the welder would weld it. He'd put his name in the box, the inspector would inspect it, and his name would go in the box. To be honest, and then we would scan those drawings and save them, and that was our QA folder for the fabrication process. And it was pretty hard to tell what the names were, to be fair, by the time it'd gone through the whole shop, been scanned, and was in the folder. And then paint was similar, and site we didn't even really have the site QA. That wasn't an issue at that point. So the first step we did, which we generally follow this through most of our implementation processes, we we looked around for some software and we found Strumus. Asked a few other fabricators, asked people overseas to see what they were using. Strumus seemed to tick all the boxes, so we got Strumus into the office and we started getting it set up. We continued doing our QA the exact same way with our staff in the workshop, guys doing the cutting, etc. But when those drawings came into the workshop, the office staff started manually pushing them through. So in Strumus, you can set up a process. So for each process that you do, you set that up in Strumus, and they work linear. So what it means is if somebody's fabricated some steel, and then somebody else wants to weld it, it won't let them do it until the inspector has inspected that fabrication. Okay, so it forces you to follow the process. If you try and skip the process, it won't let you do it. You won't be able to get the steel to move through. So what we were doing initially was we carried on with our same process. When the drawings came in, the people in the office would go into Strumus and manually push it through. So we would test it. We tested it for probably about a month, just to make sure that take all the glitches out of the system before we brought it out to the team. And then once we were happy with that, we got somebody on board who has already implemented the system. Just so happens we found a guy who had done this for 2 or 3 companies and was happy to come and do it for us. So it saved us a massive learning curve. So what we then did, as you can see there, Strumus, we could print a tag for each assembly. So when the model was made, when we draw the model, each piece in that model has a specific code that goes to it. It's got a unique code applied for each part in assembly. And so Strumus prints one tag for each assembly, and that tag contains assembly data such as weight, the code, the lotting, and the contract. And each tag has a unique assembly barcode. So when the steel's going through the shop, just using a normal phone, we bought a series of phones that weren't expensive, and we set the scanning up on the phones. The fabricator can scan onto the tag and say that he's welding that piece of steel now. And when he's finished, the inspector can come, he checks it, then he scans to say that he's inspected it, and then it's passed. Now it can be welded. So the welder can weld it. He scans on to say he's welding it, and then the weld inspector comes and he scans on to say he's inspected it. And obviously nobody can jump the queue. If you try and scan on to weld it before the fabricating inspector's been in, it won't allow it. So it sort of stops the process from not being followed effectively. And then from there, we get the reports. So on this next slide, you'll see this is just a snippet of a report. So this is the job status report showing us where each assembly is. It's also the job QA report showing us who did what. As you can see, we've got 4 processes or 5 processes there. We've got number 1, which is fabrication. 2, which is the pre-weld QA, is checking the dimensions. 3 is welding, which is the person welding it. And 4 is post-weld QA, so that's the weld inspection. And then we go to protective coatings. So that's showing us where the steel's been painted, because currently it's outsourced. So you can see it's at Nicholson's Coatings. So it's quite an in-depth report. So for every single assembly, by scanning through, this report's automated. So there's no longer a need to scan drawings. And that manual process we were doing of pushing the assemblies through was taking hours. It was a huge tax. We actually had 2 administrators pretty much, and more than half their time was spent trying to push all those assemblies through Strumus. And so with the scanning, it's automated. And you can see it gives us names, dates, times, and it's much more professional than a drawing that's been scanned in with finger marks and coffee stains and grease and oil all over it. There's also another part of that report, which that previous one shows us, it tracks at what stage each assembly is in the process, and also shows us who did what in each assembly, in each process. And this material traceability report So earlier when I spoke about a heat number that we need from the mill, which tracks basically the material, can't remember now, the mill certificate. It's tracking that mill certificate. You can see in the column about midway where it says cast reference, that's the heat number for the particular item. And Strumis tracks that for us. So when we purchase a piece of steel, we put the heat number into Strumis at that point, and then any item that gets made from that piece of steel is tracked right through there from Strumis, which makes it a lot easier for us. Sometimes one piece of steel will be one part, but it's not uncommon for one piece of steel to turn into 50 smaller parts, and on multiple projects. So Strumis tracks these heat numbers through multiple parts and through multiple projects and produces a nice little report for us at the end with just a click of a button. So it's it's definitely lifted the professionalism of that element for us, the QA and the traceability, and cut down on admin by I'd say 75% reduction in time spent in the administration of it.
That's amazing. Hearing some of those figures, Chris, around reduction in admin, but also that kind of win-win, that the customer's also getting something that they're expecting, if you like, around the level of quality that's passed over to them, in the detail and how accessible it is. You know, if they needed to find something in that quality pack that you provide, they can go through it nice and simply now, rather than going through, you know, scan drawings and so on. So yeah, really interesting to be able to get into some of that detail. It was funny, you mentioned right at the start that your process was quite simple. When you talk through it like that, it certainly kind of shows there's quite a few different elements to it, and trying to manage all those different elements is pretty complex. So we've got a couple of questions that have come through the Q&A, which is great, Chris. So I might just ask you those because they're specifically related to what we've just been talking about. So one was, what QA systems do Petone Engineering use? Specific, around QA. Is there anything in addition to Strumis, or is it just inspection documentation or something on the shop floor? How does that work? Is there any additional systems? Or
there is, which I will talk about later, but I will touch on it now as well. We do use form software, we use SiteApp Pro. So when we're doing our weld inspections, we use software. We generate a form, and it has a series of questions which you have to answer. They're compulsory, which makes sure the inspector follows the correct procedure around doing a weld inspection. And it has photos which are captured as well, so we can take pictures of them in the process of the inspection and of the item that was inspected. And then when we do internal paint, we use paint testing. It's called Posi Test, I think it is, and it talks via Bluetooth directly to the cloud into our computers. So we just type in the assembly number, and as we're doing the testing, it's automatically feeding through the data against that assembly and generating the PDF reports for us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So a nice little segue into what we're going to talk about next as well with SiteApp Pro and some of the way that you've used that around the business. A couple of other questions that have come through, I'll pass over to you. So first of all, does Strumis manage the assembly drawings for the workshop to work from as well? Is it kind of managing the actual drawings that the team are using when they're doing the fabrication and welding?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. Sorry, yeah, I didn't. It pulls the drawings in from the model, so the detailer it cuts it lots the steel and nests it, and then prints cutting lists and the likes. The actual drawings come from the detailers from Tekla, because Tekla's the drawing element, but all the information in the drawing is pulled into Strumis. So the drawings are pushed through to Strumis for Strumis to get the data and the information. And you can set Strumis up so that, you can click on the assembly in Strumis and it will bring up that drawing. So guys on the shop floor can have tablets, and when they're scanning, they can select the drawing to see it.
Yeah.
So Strumis doesn't create the drawing, but it does store it, and it does pull the information from it.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I remember we've talked before, Chris, around that that ability to be able to bring the drawing up digitally. But I know there's a transition to occur there with the team as well. You know, the team are immensely skilled fabricators and welders, but at the same time, they like to have their physical drawing in front of them, which I know is quite a common thing, you know, around the industry. So that transition to digital is progressing in various areas, but certain areas we like to keep hold of our sheets of paper, don't we, to work from. So it's quite interesting, but at least it manages that revision and control for you and so on as well. So
the next step of it is it can actually have the 3D model of what they're making as well, which comes through from Tekla. So that's available now. The guys often will go, and there's a couple of laptops, if they're really struggling with orientation, they can go in and find their assembly and then look at it 3D, turn it upside down. Yeah,
I remember there was something while I was on site a couple of months ago, wasn't there? It was a particularly interesting assembly, and there was got the model out, and you can see all the detail, whereas a 2D drawing is might take you a little while to work it out. So yeah, it's quite interesting how you've got the blending of the technology, where 90% of what we can do it through our traditional process, but we've got that extra level of capability now that we can give visibility to the team that helps save them a bit of time, and hopefully means we get it right first time as well, I suppose, is another key one when you're making assemblies like that. If we get them wrong, it can be quite expensive, either on site to adjust them or otherwise. So
yeah. There's one more step too, which we haven't, which is just in the way up in the distance at the moment, but with the QA, you can get a helmet and you can look at the steel with 3D, and it overlays the 3D model on your actual piece of steel and QAs it to within a couple of mil. And that it's not perfect yet, the technology, but it at least shows if you've done your orientation correct.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, Chris, that you're in your head, you've got that vision in mind, you know, of where the journey's going. Yes, you're not using that day to day right now, but in the back of your mind, setting your business up for success in the future is, what do I need to do with my systems and the tools that I'm investing in now that's going to allow that to happen in the future, rather than we've got to wait until it's ready, and then all of a sudden it comes around and you realize like a lot of businesses I've seen in the past where they've been waiting for technology to be ready, but actually there's lots of foundational preparation work that can be done, and you've just kind of shown it here with a lot of this work you've done with Strumis and with Tekla and SiteApp Pro, where you're building those processes and that quality in now, so that when that technology does become either available or becomes cheap enough, for businesses to invest in, then you'll be ready to adopt it, which is good. So there's just one more question that's come through from Francis. So Francis there is asking about the scanning of the actual barcodes on the parts. I might just flip back to that slide so you can see them. There we go. Is that done on a mobile phone, do you say? Is that an open source app? Is that a Strumis app? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a Strumis app. I'm sorry, I should know. I'm not sure if it's open source, but it's not hard to get on there. The site guys have it on their own personal phones. Just for the workshop, we bought phones and put it on there. So yes, it is just on a mobile phone.
Nice and easy. Great. Thanks for the questions, everyone. Hopefully that's covered them off. But anything else you'd like to talk to, just drop them into that Q&A section. So I'll pass back over to you, Chris, now to talk a little bit more about that SiteApp Pro that you mentioned and the enterprise connectivity and information you're gathering from around the business with that. So back over to you. I'll do the slide.
All right. Thanks, Frank. This one is this is about SiteApp Pro. Effectively, it's a form of software. It's called form software, I believe, but basically it produces forms which you can customize, and then people fill the form out and it creates a PDF. Pretty simple, but I find them very powerful. So previously, when we did daily reports or pre-starts, it would be done on a piece of paper, and the guys would have to sort of file it, try and keep track of it. Obviously, we know what happens with bits of paper. They tend to get lost. Not so bad with pre-starts or a daily report, but quite critical if you're doing variations and you're tracking site hours and materials and labour, and you've had them signed off, and then when you go to bill the person, you can't find it. So what we've been doing is all of that sort of stuff is now being done through this form software. The software, it tracks, like, whoever fills the form out. It's just done on your phone. So they fill the form out. It tells you who did the form, obviously, because it says he's got a PIN. He or she has a PIN, and the location of the site it's saved against the location of the site. So they log into a particular site before they fill out the forms. And we use it for all the health and safety things like pre-starts, near miss, incident reports, hazard ID. It's all stored in the cloud forever until you archive it, but even then it's still accessible. Where we've had a lot of wins with it is around the compliance. So in tying in with the QA that I spoke about earlier, those weld inspections, which I spoke about, non-conformances and variations. It's been huge for us in variations. We do a lot of seismic strengthening, and we don't intend this to happen when we price them, but on average, they increase by 20 to 30% in initial tender cost, just through new things that turn up, unforeseen issues that need to be dealt with. So that's, if that's $1 million job, you're talking $200,000 to $300,000. And 20 to 30%, not many businesses make that profit. So if we were not capturing that, we wouldn't be around for long. And so what we do is on SiteApp Pro, the supervisors can log a variation notification form very quickly. They take the photo, type in a bit of information, because the way it's set up is you can make the questions compulsory so they can't skip them. And then that form, as soon as they submit it, goes straight to our QS. So you can set up a series of email addresses for any form that it will automatically go to when it's submitted. So it's great for incident reports and things like that. Your health and safety guy wants to be on it, that goes straight into his inbox. So with those variations, goes straight to our QS. The QS forwards them straight to the client, and it can be within a matter of minutes from notifying that there was a variation to having their QS have a full form with the description, photos, everything. Makes it really easy for them. And even we've also found, simple things like a uniform request. It's amazing how long it can take, and how many emails to figure out. Somebody says they need new pants. Okay, well, what size are you? And then they come back. Then is it a site uniform? Is it site pants or workshop pants? They're different. And so to take away all that, you just have the form, has all the questions. It's compulsory to fill the questions in. So you get all the right answers, and it just cuts out a lot of the issues that you can get with people missing parts of the step or missing information. All our daily reports are done on there. We've actually got an example of a daily report. There's an example of one of the forms. So that's a daily report. The guys fill that out each day. What I do like about it is you can see those dark blue areas. There's one in there. It says, was there site welding today? If it says no, they carry on. If it says yes, it opens up another series of questions. You can also have yes, no reason. So say, for instance, in the pre-start, has everyone got the appropriate uniforms today? If they say yes, it goes straight to the next question. If they say no, you have to supply an answer as to why, because obviously you should all have your safety gear on. So really useful software, and obviously, as I said, it's all stored in the cloud. Going back just briefly to that QA one I mentioned about the weld inspections, that's set up to go to the administrator automatically. So she opens those up each day, and it tells her which assembly and what contract the job was for, so she can file that into the contract QA folder, and that's been built up like daily, so it's live. So we can give the client updates of the QA folder. We actually generally just give them a link, and so they can go in there any time and pull any QA out at any time and check up on it. The end goal is that the QA will be sent before the steel gets to site. We're not there yet. We've probably got about 2 weeks lag at the moment to get all the QA sorted. But yeah, that's the end goal.
It's really interesting, Chris, hearing about again, you've got that end goal in mind of where you're trying to go, and it's very customer focused around what's the customer going to get from some of this. Not just we've got all these benefits you've talked about internally, what about the benefits that are that the customer's going to see at their end as well? So that's really interesting to hear. Just one question from me: how have you gone about change management? How's it been adopted? Introducing Site App Pro that you've talked about, and using the apps and scanning and so on. Have there been any? Has there been any pushback? Has there been any process you've had to go through to get that adopted really well? What's it been like?
It's been quite good actually. What we've found is, like, generally we'll discuss these things with everybody first, tell them what we're proposing, and then sort of go through it with them a bit. The form, like, this is what we're proposing, this is what it looks like, and what do you think? And then they give us their feedback on it, and then we've found we've sort of, obviously you show them the benefits to them, the fact that they can fill it out faster. If you're clever about it, like I have seen, you want people to have yes, no answers ideally, and select form, drop downs and things, because guys on site, and the one downside to this particular one is you cannot do it on a desktop. You can only do it on your phone. So if you're trying to type, unless you're one of these young text people that can do things at 100 miles an hour, it's a bit of an issue to plug too much info in. So yeah, we try and show them the benefit for them and why it's better. And
absolutely. What's in it for me, right, is a big thing I talk about a lot with clients, and we're going to touch on change management a little bit more at the end of the session. We're going to talk a little bit around, I know you've got some kind of learnings from the various technologies and the journey you've been on so far. I had a question come through from Glennis. Thanks, Glennis, for joining us. Just around integration. So we've talked about Strumis and you've talked about Site App Pro. Is there any integrations that's going on there, or with any other systems in the business?
Okay. The integrations with, I guess, what was I? Shop. Well, that's kind of where we're going next with Raptor, isn't it? Around integration between the Beamline and Strumis, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good little segue again, isn't it, into the next topic that we've got around.
Just briefly, we do use ClockShark for our timekeeping. So, and on ClockShark, the guys put their time against the contract, and the contract it does through the cloud talk to Strumis and updates our budgeted hours in the contract budgets on Strumis. So yes, they are. Where possible, we will integrate everything that we can integrate. So Site App Pro, you can't really integrate Site App Pro with anything, but you can pull forms off Site App Pro and put it into a CSV file, which will then do what spreadsheets do and go into places. But yeah, so the answer to that, where possible, we are integrating. So the timesheet app integrates with the payroll and integrates with our Strumis, which is our contract budget and cost center, and then Strumis integrates with Xero. So when we approve a purchase order in Strumis, it automatically pushes it through to Xero and sets it up in the accounting software. So we haven't got everything fully integrated, but as much as possible, most of it is.
Yeah, and again, it's what could you do versus what should you do, right? That question that Catherine mentioned right at the start. There's a lot of opportunities of it would be great if, but some of these things are, just something has to sit further down the priority order than something else, right? So where it'd be great to start to use some of the CSV files from Site App Pro and bring them into Strumis to update, site progress and that kind of thing. That's probably, in terms of where it sits on an ease impact, it'd be quite a hard one to do, and how much impact would it have is, maybe debatable. So yeah, it kind of falls down the list a little bit potentially. So now there's it's really interesting to when I was on site talking to you and the team about, well, this was a really obvious one to do because, and you just kind of have gone, well, and the next one's presented itself. Let's go and take that opportunity as it's come along. So no, it's a good question. There's an interesting question again come from Francis. What about if there's no kind of data roaming available for the team on site using Site App Pro? Is there any backup kind of process in place? How does that work if there's an issue?
Yeah, good point. What we did find is on site, it doesn't it's not through the data. They've all got laptops on site, and so I can't remember what it's called, but there's a might come back to me. There is, I can't remember. It's something that the IT guys set up. But basically when the phone gets back in range of the laptop with the Wi-Fi, it pushes the information into the laptop, which then pushes it through the cloud into Strumus. Strumus, one of the problems with Strumus is it's not cloud-based. And the guy that owns it's 80-something years old, and he said, I don't want to do that. So he's not going to. But there is another company copying Strumus, and we're waiting for them. They're a Dutch company. They employed half of the Strumus employees and set up a building on the same street. So they reckon in a couple of years they'll have one, the equivalent. So unfortunately the server has to be held in our workshop for Strumus. And then they set up a link through the internet somehow. And I can't remember the term, sorry.
It's all right. Yeah, I think it's interesting though that I suppose some of those processes are time critical, have to be communicated straight away. But at the same time, if you've not got Site App Pro available for whatever reason, you have still got your original processes, right, that you could revert back to if you needed to. Obviously, it's not ideal, but as a stopgap, and like you say, it sounds like you've already, from an IT side, set up some good infrastructure that means that actually it can hold the data it needs, and then we'll send it as it gets data or as it connects back up to.
Sorry, I was thinking of the Strumus side. The question was probably related to Site App Pro, was it? Having been what I was just speaking about, but
I guess
because we're in Wellington, there's pretty good coverage. So if the guys are out of coverage, when they do get back into coverage at the end of the day, it generally picks it up. Yeah.
Cool. Great. Well, we've talked about Site App Pro there. There's probably one more technology that I know you wanted to touch on, Chris. So I'll pass back over to you to talk through Raptor and what you're doing with bringing the model into the assembly process. So yeah, over to you to have a chat about this.
Yeah, thank you. So this is to do with, do you want to flick down one more screen there? Right, we'll just show you. So this is our beam line. It's a CNC operated machine. It's 18 meters long. It can drill holes, slots. It can cope. It's basically a big milling machine, the 4.5 ton milling machine. So currently it has the base software. So if you want to go back, thank you, Frank. This Raptor software is something we identified during the Surrey assessment, and we did a cost analysis with Frank. The software that comes with the machine can really just sort of drill holes. So you can put a flash drive in, put the beam on the machine, and tell the machine which piece of steel is on there, and it will. It has a 5 tool changer. It'll just go along, find the start of the beam with a laser, and then start drilling holes very accurately up to a length of 18 meters, basically. With this Raptor software, what this can allow us to do, when they draw the model, everything's in there. So this software works out where the cleats are going to be welded onto the existing beam, and if another beam goes into it and is welded, it'll work that out, and it will. It's got a scriber, so it can mark where these cleats go. So it can scribe it scribes the assembly number on the beam, and it scribes the location of the other plates and pieces of steel that are going to go into it. So this saves the guys a lot of time. Currently, they use a tape and they mark it with chalk, and then they have to grind the mill scale and etc. off the beam, and then remeasure it, tack everything on, and then it gets checked. But by having it done with a computer, it eliminates the labour portion and reduces the non-conformances, and it gives you a permanent part number on there if the tag gets blown off for some reason. What we've actually had to do is we've had to attach pipes to our steel beams and roll the tags up and put them in the pipe to stop the sandblasting guys blasting their tags off. But so that was a huge. We worked out that Raptor would pay for itself. I think it's about 16 grand, within a month, on a big month, and maybe a month and a half if it was a bit quieter. So we've taken the team through training of the Raptor software, and just installing some hardware because we need another screen and a computer on the machine, and then we'll be hopefully getting this in for the end of October.
Awesome. I mean, yeah, I remember us having the conversation on site about this particular software, and I know it's something that we get quite a lot of questions about. when we're doing webinars and site tours is around return on investment. So it was great to hear you talking about, you know, the calculations that we did, and it wasn't, you know, it didn't take us days and days to do that return on investment calculation. It was relatively kind of quick and easy to we went and just got some rough figures around how long it takes to mark different pieces out and what's the average amount of you know, marking out required per assembly and that kind of thing, just to give us an idea. And obviously when we were coming out with a figure of around a month and a half, it, you know, became a bit of a no-brainer, doesn't it? But it wasn't a huge, you know, exercise with lots of spreadsheets and that kind of thing to justify it. It was relatively you know, logical, but you know, not too in detail to get to that point. So it was quite a good little exercise that we did on site. And looking forward to seeing the team. What's the feedback from the team been like around after the training and so on? Are they looking forward to it and saving them a job of marking out? Or
yeah, they just want us to hurry up and get the software installed before they forget the training.
Yeah.
No, they're looking forward to it. I think you might have done the calculations during your smoko, didn't you, Frank?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Sounds like me. Yeah.
It wasn't hard. There is a little bit more to it that I forgot to mention. Raptor talks to Strumus, so once you put in the machine that you're processing it, it tracks all that time for you. Which is our next big step, is getting the scanning. The scanning will do the same when the fabricator scans on to say he's fabricating. It'll start tracking time too, but unfortunately, it doesn't stop when the guys have smoko and lunch, so we've got to work around all that.
Fair enough. There's a few little nuances. That's actually a really good little segue into the next part as well. I was just going to briefly touch on some of the things that came out of your SIRI assessment and what the next couple of years is going to look like, Chris. So obviously, haven't had any questions come through at this stage around Raptor and the shop floor connectivity piece, but if there any come through, anybody got any question, please do send them in. But I'll just touch briefly on the roadmap side of things. We're not going to go into lots of detail, but what you just mentioned there around shop floor intelligence was quite interesting. So that real-time monitoring of productivity through the beamline, which is something that Raptor will allow you to do because you can trace it from Strumus. So that'll be really interesting, giving you that extra level. So we already looked at some of the dashboards that Strumus gives you, but you'll get some extra visibility on some of the other areas of the business now, which will be good to see. And some of the other areas we looked at for opportunities was around enterprise intelligence and enterprise automation. So there's in terms of the team, we talked about how we could assess all the processes within the enterprise team. So those in the team, like QS and detailing and procurement and so on, managing all those functional tasks in the business. What are the opportunities for automation in those spaces? Because we've already talked about some of those administration tasks getting automated through scanning, but is there anything else that we're doing that's a repetitive process? And that was something that came out quite high on the priority list when we did the assessment. And the same then with enterprise intelligence around how can we start to get visibility of across the range of projects as it becomes more complex and there's more different projects going on at the same time and kind of overlapping with each other in your overall process in the business. How can we get the visibility and the diagnostics on where the energy and the attention needs to go on those different projects was another discussion point. And then last but not least, we've already touched on some of the learning and development side of things. You've already talked about training on Raptor and training that you've done with some of the other software that you've brought in. And potentially, if you're starting to introduce things like we want people to bring up the model on tablets, or maybe when we progress to having the technology that we can overlay the model onto the beam to do the Q&A, then that's going to be require a bit of upskilling for the team, both hard skills in terms of using that particular software, but also softer skills around what happens with that data and information, and why is it important that I interact with this software in the right way and get the right information into it, because ultimately that's going to have a knock-on effect downstream. So some really interesting things coming up for you over the next couple of years. But in the time I've just been talking there, I've had some questions come through just about Raptor, so we'll maybe just jump back to that. So the first question we've got is, what are the implications for adding information into Raptor? Can design changes be adopted easily? So if there's a change to the detailing that comes through, which I know is quite common in the industry, as things progress, there's always changes. How does that get pulled through into Raptor and and the delivery there?
That's a good point. I'll be honest, I don't know the answer to that. I know that the existing software which came with the Beamline itself, which is Petone, I think it's called, that you can customize that at the machine on the console. You can modify, you can put in the flash drive and then modify items basically at the machine. With Raptor, it would be just a matter of updating the model and then reissuing. If you can't do it on the machine, you just update the model and then you have to just reissue. What happens is when you modify the model, you've got you have your updated model as your most recent, so you supersede the previous one, and whatever the model is the current one. I know with Raptor you can drag an assembly off the model and pull it straight into the Beamline software, into Raptor, and get it to drill that particular one. So it does have some quite unique functionality. I'd imagine changes would not be too hard.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really big one for the industry as well, right? As things you get version upon version, as things tweak and change, you discover things on site, whatever it might be. That ability, again, through that what we call that integrated product life cycle, if we've got the latest version of this, the latest detailed model of this building, how are we going to make sure that everything now is built to that and we haven't got old drawings out there and things like that? Well, this is another piece of the puzzle for solving that, isn't it? Because we're potentially, with fewer drawings required because we're marking out the locations of all those different fabrication elements already. So yeah, really, really interesting.
Another thing you can do is with Raptor, is you can do, and Strumis, is you can do your nesting from the office, and you can do your ordering, your lotting, which beams are going to go when. So you can sort of send them a schedule basically of what you're going to do for the day, and then they've just got to put their steel on.
Yeah.
And press go. Yeah,
it's kind of moving what do I want my skilled, because we've talked again about the getting hold of really skilled fabrication and welding team members. So how can we make sure that those ones we have got and we can get hold of, how can we maximize the utilization of their skills? We want those people focused on that welding and that fabrication, not wasting time walking around looking at drawings, separating lots out. We want to be able to feed them with all the right information, the right materials at the right time to keep them focused on that kind of bottleneck process, if you like, around fabrication. So,
but you'll just see out there, Frank, on the brochure, it says modify part data. So obviously,
got better eyes than me.
Should read my brochure.
So some more questions coming through, which is great. Keep them coming. So, Bob, good to have you on. Bob's just asked around: have you had to go to Raptor Ultimate to get time back into Strumis in terms of the productivity on the Beamline, or is there a...
I don't know, sorry, because we haven't moved to that. No, that's one of our next step things, is to get that time. So we're not using Raptor yet. We've just, as I said, we've done the training. We put in the hardware in. Next step is to get the software in and start using it. But cool. Sorry, Bob, I can't answer that.
No worries. I'm sure you guys will chat anyway around when that comes around. So we've got another question come through. Where you've got projects that have got thousands of parts, are you able to show a report about what's been done and what's at what stage in production, either through yes. Raptor or welding and fabrication, I guess?
Yeah, with the scanning we can now. So because the scanning's live and as it's going through the shop, it's sending the signal immediately. We can get reports of what stage everything's at, and it's been really beneficial. One of the most, the person that's got the most benefit from it's been the QS when she's doing claims. Rochelle's able to produce a report, and it shows to the client how much ton at each stage has had processed, and it seems to it makes it much quicker and easier for her to generate her claim for the month. But it also is great evidence for the client. They're generally quite accepting of it and pay accordingly.
Yeah, again, another massive nuance for your business with that nature of claiming doing invoice claims monthly because of the length of projects, rather than just invoicing when you've dispatched a part. Having visibility of where everything is at is really important to be able to get accuracy on all the effort you've put in, and getting paid at the right time for those respective efforts. And and from talking to Rochelle, I know she's pretty grateful for that. We did talk about as well the technology and where it's moving in terms of visualization and diagnostics, where we could actually start to feed some of that data that you've got about status back into the model, and start to get a visual in terms of that model that we looked at right at the start, of which beams are in place, fitted on site, and which ones haven't yet been fabricated, and it will kind of color code the whole model, and you could zoom in and understand exactly which beams. And rather than looking at rows and rows of data, there's an opportunity to take that and visualize it in a much more user-friendly way to help diagnose where things are at as well. So that was quite an interesting one. Some more questions coming through. It's great. Please keep them coming. It'll be good to good to hear from you. So we've got, what happens if we discover a form question or a question sequence that doesn't really fit on site? So, for example, a hazard or other aspect has been missed during the original assessment. What are you doing with the forms? Are they being overridden by site personnel or the office? How does that work if the form's not quite fit for purpose on that particular occasion?
Oh, well, we generally would, if we get a thing that doesn't work, we try and modify it in some ways, obviously to stop it from happening again. But the office the forms are fully customizable. So I'm not 100% sure how best to answer the question, but if it's an error in the form, we can change the form. And unfortunately, no, the guys on site are not able to manipulate the form on the phone. They just have to answer the questions as they are. But if it is health and safety based SIDAT Pro, so there is a whole hazard. It's like it leaves an open form for hazards, so it's always on there, and because hazards are something you're adding to all the time and removing as they go. So that's called a live form, and you pin that form to the contract and just update it as the hazards change. Same for hazardous substances. There are two forms that can be basically pinned. But what we have gone away from that, because there are some things that guys just like to have a piece of paper in their hand and they write, like we have a whiteboard hazard ID, and it's just there, and you quickly go up and you write it on, and away you go. But what we do is get them at the end of the week to take a photo of their hazard ID form board as part of the weekly toolbox, just to show that it's there and current and being actioned.
Yeah, it's great. And again, with things like that, it's got to be fit for purpose for the team on site. And if the team on site want to be able to go and see a whiteboard that's got their hazards on, and that's what's going to keep people safe, then we need to obviously keep making sure that we're meeting that need. But at the same time, like you say, you've kind of closed the gap by having a form that you can capture each week that is that board being used effectively, and is it up to date, and so on. So yeah, it's kind of a blend of the digital and physical there. But again,
that's the client's push. The client wants to be able to walk over and see what hazards you've got on their form, basically. Or if if there's a fire, he wants to be able to see what hazardous substances you've got on site. That's what they said to me anyway.
We've got a question coming in from Wayne DNH, just asking around. Well, first of all, he's saying good work on Strumis and the QA. It looks like you're doing some good stuff. So, but he's just asked around the pipe that you mentioned to contain the labels when you go for coatings. What are you doing with that pipe? How's it attached to the part?
It's attached with a carabiner and a chain. And it's honestly, at the moment, it's a steel pipe. We've tried plastic ones and stuff, and there's something about sandblasters, they can just wreck anything. So it has to be a steel pipe, and we roll it up, we push it in, and then there's a hole through the other end of the pipe where we just put a pin. Obviously, it's an overhead cost, and you've got to keep that cost quite low, because they tend to get lost. But
right. That was really interesting. Thanks again for all the questions from everybody online. We've actually taken up pretty much our whole hour, so I'm just gonna wrap us up there, Chris. If there's any more questions, obviously there'll be contact details on the invite for the webinar. If you want to get in touch, please do. So it just really leaves me to say a massive thank you to Chris for coming on and giving us your precious time. I know you've got a lot on at the moment, but great to share the journey. Thanks very much as well to the team here at the EMA that make these webinars possible. So Jason, Louise here in the studio with me, and Catherine, who did the introductions, making all these things work. And hopefully you found it useful. Any feedback you've got for us would be great to hear it. So there was plenty more topics I'm sure we could have got onto, Chris, but we'll have to leave it there for today, and maybe we'll have another opportunity to have another chat another time.
Very good. All right. Well, thanks a lot for having me. Appreciate the journey. It's been great, and it's only just starting, to be fair.
Yeah. Great. Thanks very much, Chris. Speak to you soon.
Will do. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.